been toying with this idea of a teacher leader, developing a certification for, teachers who don't want to be administrators, but want to be, like lead teachers, like leader teachers. So, curriculum development is important, but also keeping an eye on what is current in the field of curriculum development, curriculum design, and all that. Especially for those of you that are in the process of interviewing now or might be interviewing for September. It's a thing that supervisors and principals love to ask. Your thoughts on curriculum. How do you design curriculum? How do you feel about curriculum by design? How do you, if you were given, a certain area to teach, how would you go about teaching it? How would you design it? And also the other thing too with curriculum, you design a curriculum so you make sure that that's what you as a school or a district feel that is important, and what you don't want to have your teachers going rogue and teaching whatever they want. Okay, and that I know can become, in some places, becomes a common problem when teachers just, I'm going to teach whatever I want and not teach what is on your curriculum, and that's where places run into trouble. I picked the Chathams. I was looking for something in New Jersey so we could use, New Jersey law and everything as a backdrop, but something that's been, current in the curriculum. And if you look at it, and I'm going to ask for your thoughts and summaries, but I think it's a good topic to talk about only because it's New Jersey, it's current. And it could stem, this could be any district. This is not, a condemnation of the Chathams or, this only would happen in a place like the Chatham. It could happen in any school district. And it doesn't have to necessarily be, with Islam. It could be with any religion. It could be with any topic. It doesn't have to be, it's just, this is what I happen to find. And I think it's good for a discussion. So before we start, does anybody want to summarize what this whole thing is about, because it's and it's still, which I forgot to post that other link. I'm going to find the article now while somebody's talking. It was just in those parents are suing again. You find that article. But anybody want to summarize what's going on in the Chathams?
I'll do it.
Sure.
Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Yep.
Great, I could barely hear myself. Sorry about that. I actually had to take my headset off because it doesn't actually have a microphone. So I've been looking at this case, and so what happened is for a 7th grade course, and the basic tenets of Islam were being taught, and the parents observed that the students brought home homework where it said specifically, and I have this in my notes, there is one God named blank, and blank is his messenger, and they took that as the school is indoctrinating Islamic beliefs on the student population. Now, they went to a Board of Education meeting. Well, yes, they went to the meeting, and they raised their concerns. And after the Board of Education meeting, they received very negative feedback, a lot of stuff on Facebook, a lot of stuff online. This kind of blew up. A lot of the, especially the more conservative points of view, kind of strung that into their, what call it again, dialogue, rhetoric. I'm not quite sure what you call that, but in any case, it was on national news. There was another Board of Education meeting. Parents are attempting to sue the school again. And what it comes down to really is whether the school was indoctrinating a specific religious belief. And one thing to note on here is that the school does have a religion in schools policy, and it does have a controversial issue policy that was designated way before this became an issue. So they actually had something to refer to.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I think Rob's got it. Pretty much nailed it on the head. And it's been an ongoing saga now. This is going on. I want to say it's 2 years since the first, when this first started surfacing. Um, let's start with this. How is curriculum in your schools supervised? What's the process for, do you submit lesson plans for approval? Do you have to follow a template for writing lesson plans? How do if you want to do something that may not be exactly in line with the curriculum, do you need to get approval for that? Talk to me about how curriculum is supervised in your school, and by whom is curriculum supervised in your school?
So I can chime in and start by saying that last year I taught at a different school, which I thought followed up on curriculum a lot more than the school I'm currently at right now.
Okay.
I liked last year's system better because it gave me more guidance on how to create a lesson plan. And the curriculum we use is NY, which I thought was a little off considering we're in New Jersey. But it's basically what they wanted us to use for our lesson plan. And when we created our lesson plan, it was very intensive. I mean, we had misconceptions, how we would address them, almost like minute by minute of what we were doing in the classroom, small group instruction. And when we submitted it, we did it through Google Docs. And the people who would follow up with us would basically be our math coach or our literacy coach. And they would follow up by making comments on whatever we submitted. And once they made comments, if there was any corrections that had to be made, they would go ahead and put it under the comment area. Once observations were happening in the classroom, not only would VP step in, but the coaches as well, and they would actually walk in with your lesson plan copy. So they were kind of asking, how are you introducing this lesson today? Where's your objectives? So I believe that they were more strict about how to follow the curriculum and the lesson plans. This school this year, our lesson plan was very plain. It was like, what are you doing today? List one objective, connect it with a common core, and just give us a basic idea of what you're doing. Last year I did 5th grade with expedition learning. This year I did 2nd grade, which was like based off of domains. And we literally just copied and pasted what was on the Engage NY, and our VP were completely fine with that.
Okay. Who's evaluating? It's as you said, your literacy coach, your math coach is looking at your curriculum. Okay. Who else has how's curriculum supervised in your school?
Was that question for me?
No, anybody who's in the classroom right now. How's curriculum supervised in your school?
Ours is pretty basic. We don't have, our lesson plans are once a month. And we turn them in, and it's pretty simple and pretty basic. Our teachers have a lot of freedom in what they're teaching. There is definitely some off curriculum, but it's supervised by our plans go to our principals or our vice principal. And they see what's going on in the classrooms, and and from our plans and that from that standpoint. But it is pretty. We do have a lot of freedom in what we do, and I don't see a lot of are you on your curriculum, are you not on your curriculum type of questions from our supervisors.
Okay.
Just to chime in real quick on this whole topic, I actually teach the same stuff.
Okay.
My curriculum does follow, so I teach Hinduism and Buddhism and Christianity and things like that. And the question comes up every year from the students is, aren't you not allowed to teach this?
Okay.
They're 8th graders, so they have a little bit of knowledge on it. But every year they say the same thing about teaching religion in a classroom.
Okay. And Ryan, how do you answer that question every year when you get the question?
We tell them we're not teaching it. We're not impressing upon them the religion. We're teaching them the background of the religion and what and the people who follow it and things like that. We're not trying to impress upon anybody, any religion.
And that's what we were doing too. Like we were taught about religion growing up in all kinds of major religions, but not how to believe. And that was a very important distinction. Like this is what it's all about. This is what the people who follow this religion are taught, and this is how they're believing. But we were never told. I mean, in the Swedish school, it was indoctrination as far as Darwinism. They're like, there are religions out there, but this is the truth. This is science.
Mm-hmm.
This is, evolution. That's what they were. That's what they were indoctrinating in us. So that was the difference.
Okay. Ryan's on point. If I don't know if I have it as a question, but if you're the principal, you're some administrator, and you get that same question, whether from a teacher, a student, a parent, why are you teaching my kid religion in a public school? And I think Ryan's answer is good. We're not impressing religion. We're teaching different religions, but there's one like foundational piece of information that no one can argue with. Why you're teaching this?
Does that have to do with the New Jersey standard? Well, in this case, New Jersey. So if you look at the standard over here, there's one standard that meets it, and it's 6.2.8.d.3
Yep.
And it's not teaching religion; it's teaching the history of what the religion is, the history of the basic beliefs.
That Rob hit on the head. Yeah, it's in the standards. These are accepted New Jersey state standards that every public school has to follow. It's in the standards. Now, I can imagine that depending on where you are, not only in the state, but depending if this was, depending on where you are in the country, I don't think that, I think curriculum is different. I think how things are taught is different. I'm hoping that you looked and really thought about that idea in the first chapter of the book about the hidden curriculum, which is all the stuff that is not in the book per se, but all the stuff that kind of goes along with depending on what a topic. And that could be, it doesn't have to be necessarily in social studies or in English. It could be in any curricular area. What is really being taught? What's the stuff that, comes across when we teachers teach, do our personal biases, which may be good or bad, come out when we teach certain things. And that's a real important piece of this puzzle too, is what are we really teaching? How are we teaching it? And that is that potentially, does that have an impact on how the kids learn it? There's topics in computer science that I teach that I think are dry, that I just find boring. I gotta teach them though. But when I say they're boring, what are the kids gonna think? Oh, it must be boring because Mr. Beagle says they're boring. So you really have to. There's a huge part of that curriculum that's hidden that you really have to come to grips with. Regardless of what you're teaching. But we got to think first of all when you write a curriculum or when you write a lesson plan. Here's what standards they follow. How many of your schools have a formal curriculum that you can actually see and read? By a show of hands in front of the camera, how many of you have an actual curriculum? If you're in the classroom, you were hired, someone said, here you go, here's your curriculum. Okay, I see 1, 2, yeah. Okay, and then I see people looking at me like, crazy? Yeah, for those of you that have curriculum, talk to me about what does it look like? What does it, what does it address? Is it detailed? Is it, is it current? Talk to me.
Well, in my school, the last 2 years we've been working on making our curriculum more updated. We've been using a program called Atlas that allows to see the curriculum step by step, going from marking period like 1 to the last marking period, and it's a helpful tool for all teachers to follow.
Yeah, the Rubicon Atlas is for curriculum mapping. I use it too. And I know it's big if you're in a Catholic school in the diocese, they've been big on it. The idea, and you have Heidi Hayes Jacobs' book on the big picture. Somehow putting a map together, a visual representation of your curriculum. And I think it's helpful for what we did at Bergen, because ideally, when you teach English 1 in high school, at the end of the year, every English 1 section should finish at the same, with the same content. So when so you're horizontally aligned, meaning it doesn't matter what teacher I have, I'm learning the same thing. And then at the end of the year, you should be vertically aligned, because then I pass that baton off to English 2, and you should pick up right where English 2 needs you to be. Okay. Does that happen all the time? No, absolutely not. How many times I hear of, I've got one teacher who's on, it's January and they're in chapter 5 and the other one's in chapter 17. Okay. Which one's right? You know, is that appropriate? It could be depending on the needs of the class, but you know, how do we justify if you want kids to learn, you know, these skills by the end of the course, if you've got someone that's behind or ahead or too far ahead, are they really learning what they should be learning? So the idea of curriculum mapping is a good one, because a lot of schools really don't know what they teach. You know, there are times we've hired teachers. We want you to, you know, we're looking for someone to teach art right now. Well, you know, what's the art curriculum? Well, I've had 3 different art teachers in the last 5 years. So what's the curriculum? You know, or is it, here's the curriculum, here's exactly what you're going to do, here's the units and all that stuff, and it's up to you how to implement it. So for those of you that have a defined curriculum, talk to me about what's in your defined curriculum. Anybody else with what's in your defined curriculum that you're given? Anybody? Did everybody get the copy when you were hired? Did you get your curriculum? When you were hired as a teacher, did someone give you a curriculum and say, this is what you need to teach?
I got a curriculum. It's very different now, though, than the one that I was given.
Okay.
Just in fact, we've changed it over the years, and it now fits everything that I set up and teach because I've made the modifications to it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I saw Colleen vehemently shaking her head no. You weren't given a copy of your curriculum.
No, I was given a copy of the expectations and what I'm supposed to do. However, as a guidance counselor, the curriculum is loose, if I could be generous, only because, you know, we're kind of following our SGOs and board goals. So what the board goals are, we try to support, and then we have on top of that our own SGOs. So really our curriculum is very free-flowing. Like we started, it was more mental health, and now we're getting into larger topics like this coming year. Okay.
For those just joining us at home, tell us what an SGO is, or a SCO, for those of us that use the term often.
That fabulous student growth outcome.
Okay. And what does that mean?
Where does the student start and where does the student finish? I think as succinctly as I can put it. So you want to see that, you know, take a concept, I guess, from the beginning and where do they get to at the end? However you want to define it, whether it's math related, science, art, interdisciplinary. So ours are more, you probably guys use like Naviance at the high school level. That's what ours are based on. Yeah. So it's hard goal. So it's not objective.
Exactly. It's a measurable, where are you now, and where, you know, how can you prove that they learned something? There's also different ways to, you know, make the numbers how they are, but yeah, that's, you know, and that's part of curriculum too, is, you know, I'm starting, this is where my students start at the beginning of the year, and this is what, you know, I want them to be able to do by the end of the year, and will they get there? Do I have something that I can measure to do that? So, you know, and guidance, don't discount the role. You know, there's a lot of things in guidance, because that's what my wife does, where you have to, you know, what is something that a kid's going to learn from meeting with their guidance counselor by the end of the year, you know? And it could be they're going to learn about some type of you know, college awareness, could be career awareness, it could be something. There's certainly things you can measure. So it's not just, you know, planning curriculum, especially planning student growth outcomes, is not just for, you know, a classroom teacher. Anybody else that doesn't have their curriculum? I mean, the yeses are boring. Who doesn't have a curriculum? Who was hired with, was anybody given the textbook as the curriculum? Say, here's the textbook. And anybody actually, and that was the curriculum? No? Okay. All right, now think about this now. You know, let's put on, for those of you that are going at leadership, think about it, you're a curriculum supervisor. Okay, so now you've done your time in the classroom, and now you are supervising, let's say, a department or an area, and you've got, I don't know, 20 teachers that you're supervising. What would you do if one of your teachers starts to deviate from their curriculum? And I don't mean like a little bit. I mean, we're not, you find, and generally how it starts is through a complaint from a parent that they are not teaching something that's in the curriculum. What do you do?
Well, I think in the case of this that we were talking about, that the parents had their issue with the teaching of Islam, I would obviously take out the little policy, controversial issues, and I would take a look at, talk to the teachers. So say for argument's sake that the teacher was, if for example, it was a Christian teacher and they were citing Bible verses and using that in their curriculum and clearly stating that, trying to indoctrinate, then I would take out, the policy and saying that you cannot do that. This is against the policy, and it says right here. And then, go like it says that, that you may express, a personal opinion, but you also have to promote. You have to show both opinions. You can't be, biased towards one. So that's, I would take out the policy and clearly, tell them, okay, when you do X, Y, and Z, you're breaking the policy, and this is how you can do it differently. And tell them, you're teaching about all different religions, and this is what you have to do. So, I guess that's where I would start. But again, okay. I'm not in the classroom yet, so that's just
I think that's a good start. What else might you do if you're the supervisor? You hear one of your teachers is going rogue. What's something you might do? As a means to go ahead.
Well, you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, at my school, a lot of times at the beginning of the year, they talk about a lot of drop-ins. The supervisors or principals would drop into the class. And, of course, throughout the year, that kind of slows down a little bit. It starts off, but then it slows down. So I think, particularly in the high school I work, a lot of times I think they'll hear more from the parents and the kids as far as if a teacher's going rogue and just not being an effective teacher. So I think in that case, I guess then the teacher would, drop in a lot more. And that kind of happens in my school too with some teachers that they'll all of a sudden be getting dropped in every week or every other week to just, to observe.
Brendan's right on target. That's the first thing, as someone who's done this before, it's time for a pop-in. Let's see what's going on, and I'm not going to really tip my hand and say why I'm here. It's time for a pop-in, and I have, I reserve that right just to kind of pop in informally and just see what's going on, because I want to see if there's any substance to the claims of, what may or may not be going on and what you may or not be teaching. So I want to do that. I do want to, I'm a fact kind of guy, I like to have data in front of me. I like to know, well, what are we suggesting is being taught? What is, what is this a good thing? Is this a bad thing? How is it impacting the curriculum? One of the best books I ever read, this is a long time ago, but there's a book called Lies My Teacher Told Me. I forget the author. It's I don't want to say it's a classic, but it's a great book. And it talked about bias in the curriculum. And it's kind of especially focused on history. But let's say one of my favorite examples is the Kennedy assassination. I'm a history teacher, and I really first learned about it when I was a junior, and I took American history too, and I learned about Kennedy. So what if the book says Lee Harvey Oswald by himself, Texas School Book Depository, what if I decide I want to present alternate theories? Will that get me in trouble? Not me, it's in the curriculum, sort of, but here I am talking about something that is definitely part of the curriculum. We're talking about the Kennedy assassination, but I'm talking about the grassy knoll.
I think if you had credible sources, I think there's a limit. Because the textbook, let's face it, in some classrooms the textbooks might be old, and there's constantly new information that comes out. So just because it says one thing in the textbook, that could be old. So that could actually be a great supplement in saying, hey, this is what they believed up until this time. But now we have this new research that just came out. Pluto isn't a planet anymore, even though all our textbook says Pluto was a planet. Well, it isn't.
Yeah, you know what? I'm sorry. It's still a planet. I don't want to hear that. How can you have a planet all of a sudden? It's like, yeah, by the way, those of us, and I'll admit I'm 40 years old. I wasn't lied to. Pluto's a planet. All right, let's not go there. Sorry, I don't want to digress. When all of a sudden I heard that, like no, Pluto's a planet. It's always been a planet. There were 9 planets in the solar system, and sister told me so in grammar school, and that's all there is to it. So I don't want to entertain that there's 8. So I'm sorry, I digress. But Maria's right. Like that's how if this is what the book says, and I'm sorry I cut you off, Maria, but that's what the book says, right?
But there could be a new information that comes out. So I think it depends. Like your question is, you have to look at what the source is, right? So if you go completely rogue and go, out of the like what is considered a true source, if you go like completely, hypothetical or like completely off the, off the grid basically, and try to teach kids something that hasn't been verified, then I think that's different. I mean, I do think that you like, the whole 9/11, people say, oh, it wasn't a plane from Newark. It was, we have eyewitnesses who said X, Y, and Z, and they saw something completely different. Of course, you can mention it, but I mean, I think you have to be very, very careful with how you do it. But we're also in a society now where what is truth and whose truth is it that we're teaching? And I think we have to make sure that we teach the students how to verify and be, critical of sources. So I think you can broaden that. And then you have the Gulf of Tonkin. The government was lying to us. Jessica Lynch, the government, the papers were lying to us. So there's all these things that we have since found out. So I think, the JFK assassination is a good example. So,
yeah. I agree. Go back to my question. As a supervisor, you find the teacher is straying from the topic, from the stated curriculum, what do you do?
I think you can also, depending on how you feel about the teacher, add a mentor if they don't already have one. Kind of not a backdoor way, but an encouraging way to have them see, hey, this is how this teacher manages our classroom, how they get through things X, Y, and Z. Here's how I would like you to move along. You're progressing, but I would like to see a better or this way for you to progress.
I think that mentoring, I don't care what school you're in, if you are new to any school, not new to teaching necessarily, but if you're new to a school, you should have a mentor who is not a supervisor, who doesn't have any impact on whether you get hired or fired, who you can go to for stuff like that, but who can also do things like drop in and say, what are you doing? What's going on? Why are you, what are we teaching here? So yeah, I definitely, that is a huge, and it's, we kind of say, we take it for granted. Oh, you should have a mentor. You absolutely need to have someone. And if you don't, if your school doesn't have something like that, you need to find somebody, who, you make friends with someone who seems like they know what they're doing. I can't tell you how many people that I do that with just because, they might ask me and I might, I might follow up, and I just kind of develop that relationship. But listen, what I say or think has no bearing on whether you come back next year. So I don't mind helping you out. But I think that's a really important thing too. What else would you do? You're the supervisor and your teacher is not teaching the curriculum. Anything else you might want to consider?
I would consider actually addressing it probably during a grade level meeting, so I don't single her out, or even have her visiting into a classroom, someone who could serve as a mentor, so they can see like what type of track the person's on. And then of course follow up with, this is exactly why I made you do this, or this is why I addressed this issue during the meeting, just so that you understand that you might be deviating from what's on the curriculum, and it might be offensive to some students or to some parents. I'm more of a less confrontational supervisor, I guess you can say, because before we're supervisors, we're all on that side where we can be offended by an upper authority. So I would definitely want to address it more in a group manner than singling the person out, because they might just be a strong believer in that religion, and they might say, well, you know what, everyone's going to hell if they're not believing in this. So I definitely would approach it in a more professional manner, so they understand that this is a guideline that's in your profession, and it's something that you kind of vouch to follow when you are certified in this position.
It's a good point too. You get that teaching license. Part of that, what kind of responsibility comes with that? I agree, Ashley. That is a good point. Anybody else for what are we doing with our our difficult teachers?
I actually have more of a question, since I'm kind of in different roles than most people here. So let's say this kind of thing happens, and teachers kind of going very, very far from what the written curriculum is. What if there's a justifiable basis for them not teaching a certain thing, or teaching a certain thing that's not on the curriculum? What if there's a major oversight that's been overlooked for some reason until this point? I mean, if we look back over history, we could say, there are certain time periods in which things that are on the curriculum now would never be considered to be on the curriculum. And could be the teachers an innovator, could be the teachers, thinking in the future. Now, is the curriculum the end law, or is it something that can be adjusted?
I'll let anybody before I chime in. Anybody want to take Rob's question? How can we adjust curriculum?
I think curriculum's always being adjusted constantly. Like, I know there's always like some topics they've always like put in the curriculum. You see like something that's major that change and could put in the curriculum. So I believe the curriculum is always evolving, it's always changing.
Okay. Anybody for a process for how we modify curriculum? Or is that anybody's
in terms of modification? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but in terms of modification, I mean, I haven't gone into the teaching levels yet, but I do have, I'm still friends with many of my high school teachers currently, through subbing and whatnot. And I see that the majority of them do tend to bring in other external factors into the classroom to really tie in. So it's like a modification to the actual curriculum, but not necessarily an extreme modification. It's really just to help students, tie out the outside world, bring it into the classroom, and, vice versa, which really helps out. And me personally, as a student, that helped me out as well.
Agreed. I've taught AP Computer Science for a number of years, and if I get time at the end of the year after the AP exam, I'll show them War Games. War Games is a 1983 movie with Matthew Broderick before he was really a name. I think it was before Ferris Bueller, and it ties in a lot to hacking and backdoors and stuff. There's a tie to the curriculum. I'm not just showing you something because, I want to. It's ancillary. It kind of makes sense. And I think the first question as a teacher is, well, why am I doing this? Is it because I really just, I'm showing the TV show numbers because I'm a math teacher? That's a stretch. Am I showing you something because there's a direct tie or even a close tie to what I might be talking about? Yes. Am I showing you something for different points of view? All that stuff. Yes, I agree. Has anybody ever done formal curriculum review? Like for those of you that are teachers, any summer, we're rewriting curriculum. Anybody ever done that? Some schools have, and districts will do that. Okay, this year it's English, so they'll pay people over the summer to work on curriculum. They're going to just rewrite curriculum. They have a committee that comes up with it. They send it to the board. The board approves it, and then all of a sudden, you've got a different curriculum. That is generally how schools will do it. There might be someone that is you might have like a lead teacher that develops curriculum. With other people, sometimes by themselves. Depends. There are curriculum writers. It just depends on how your district's set up. But you can make formal modifications to the curriculum. But I know we're all kind of hitting too on what happens if the book leaves something out, or if the book has a certain perspective. I mean, I'm kind of hitting on social studies, but it could be other areas too. But if there's something that's missing, or something that we know may be different now, it's I kind of, I think we've seen a lot in the last, I'd say 2 or 3 years. We've heard a lot about, we have to. I think we're starting to sanitize our history, and there are parts of our history as a country and as a planet and all that are bad. Let's face it. We're not, there's no perfect anything. But how do we, if we don't, those who fail to study history are doomed to repeat it? I don't think I think we have to learn about the good and the bad and the ugly and the all of it, because, I don't want my kids to grow up and learn something um, that's just watered down, that because we're afraid that we might, yeah, there's parts of United States history that are awful, but we can't just, deny that it happened. We have to learn about why it happened and what happened so that we don't make that same mistake again. If we say that, hey, you know what, I hated long division. I hate teaching long division. I still can't do my son's 4th grade long division. They still have to learn it, because it doesn't make any sense, like using the calculator, if you don't understand the process of when you divide a number. It's the same kind of thing. So I think that, those of you, regardless if you end up in teaching or administration, you're going to end up with some tough things to consider. And one of them is how do I make sure that, we're properly learning about everything and not just, the good stuff or the rosy stuff, all of it I think is really important. Feel free to agree or disagree.
I agree. I think that one of the major things that I do in the classroom is teach current events with whatever I'm teaching. So like if it's something about immigration right now, with the whole issue of the border and how they're taking their children away, I mention that in the classroom. Even if the parent thinks it's controversial for the student at whatever age to watch the news, I encourage them to at least be informed about the current event that's happening and why it's important for us to learn what the processes of immigration and the push and pull factors from other countries that are having people literally running out of their country. And I think it enhances the curriculum. It makes the students want to learn more about it, because they can actually relate to it, even if they're not Spanish or Latino. It still makes them feel like, okay, like these are real people, like the push and pull factors of their country or our country are real, and I see them. I mean, I live an awesome life, that's why they want to come live here, or they're living a horrible life over there, that's why they want to come over here. So the current event is something that I learned back in my undergrad school when I was doing communications with one of the professors at St. Peter's, and we would do, the news reporter class, and she would actually have us write like current events and how we would, I guess, report them. And I kind of carried that on into the classroom.
I think that's a really good point, because, and especially let's use the immigration as a perfect example. How do I teach that? How do I present information about stuff that's going on? Let's say, use that example. That's unbiased as a teacher, even if I might have maybe I have a bias one way or the other. Maybe I'm pro-immigration, maybe I'm anti-immigration, whatever I am. How do I present that neutrally? Because that's not fair to my kids. If I impose a bias on the kids that I teach, they're going to pick up that bias, and then they're going to say, well, Mr. Spiegel told me that, so it must be true. I remember my he's 10 now, but my son was, God, he had to be maybe 4. Maybe at the latest he was 5 years old. We were going to preschool. Had to be. He wasn't before his kindergarten. It had to be in preschool. And it was the day of it was the anniversary. It was 2013. It was the 20th anniversary of the first World Trade Center attack. And he heard it on the radio because listening to 1010 Wins, and he says to me, oh, Daddy, that must have been a really bad day. He's 4 years old. It was a bad day. I said, yeah. And he goes, Daddy, what did the bad people look like? And I'm like, oh, wow. And I kind of gave him the typical teacher answer that bad people look like anything, you know, it doesn't. But I had, wow, if I answered that a certain way, then he's going to pick up on that. And now he's going to believe because my dad told me that, you know, this is what a bad person looks like. You know, and I was like, wow, that, and you're 4, you know, what am I in for? You're 4 years old, but you know, forget about being a teacher, but as a parent, you know, so I think about that as a teacher. If I, you know, when it's funny how kids will come to you, it doesn't matter what you teach. And if there's something going on, they want to talk about it. They feel you're the teacher they want to talk about it with. It's coming out, you know, Mr. Spiegel, how do you feel about this, that, or, you know, something that's going on in the world, you know, after the Florida shootings, Mr. Spiegel, do you think, you know, should you be carrying a gun? Okay, you know, and you start to think about, you know, because they want to know, they want to think, what's a teacher's perspective on this? You know, do you feel, you know, do you feel safe as a teacher? What would you do if there was a, you know, a school shooting, you know? And I have to try and put my bias aside because I don't want to say anything like, you know, let's arm every teacher or no guns in school. I don't want to say either one of them, regardless of what I may or may not believe. You know, I want to make sure that what I present as a teacher is as unbiased as possible.
But in that case, and I think number one there is that you are aware of what your own bias is, and then learn maybe both sides in, you know, on the gun control debate, right? So you learn both sides, and you have people on this side that says arming teacher will make school safer because then the good guys also have guns. And then there are other people who say absolutely there should be no guns anywhere and nobody should have a gun. So you present both sides, and then it depends on the age of the kids too. You have to obviously bring it to their level. But I mean, I remember in school, you know, all our history books says, oh, Sweden was neutral and we did not have anything to do with, you know, Nazi Germany. And then later, of course, we let all the trains go through the country. And so what is neutrality, you know? So there's all these things that we were taught in school. And then later things, you know, come out in a different way. But I think number one step is for you to be aware of your bias so you can learn the other side of the argument and be able to present that as equal, I guess, as possible. But I mean, it also did say in this policy somewhere that you are allowed to have an opinion, but I forget exactly, but it has to be in a dispassionate manner, which can be very difficult sometimes, obviously, if you have very strong feelings. But I thought that was really interesting.
A dispassionate opinion. That's almost that's I don't know if that could even, you know,
double negative.
Yeah.
Well,
it's like jumbo shrimp.
Unprejudiced and dispassionate manner and cannot be allowed to disrupt the educational process. So, I don't know. It was interesting to me. I had never seen anything like that before.
There's a lot of policy that governs, you know, curriculum. There's state law and state regulations, and a lot that's implemented by the local district. Excuse me. And some of them will do that differently. You know, they'll implement that kind of stuff differently. I think in the area geographically we live in the United States, we're more in tune with trying to be neutral. I think depending on if we were talking about, you know, if we'll take the same example and say gun control, and this was in southern, you know, the southern United States, Texas, you know, anywhere down south, it would be a totally different story. You know, it would be, you know, teachers would just be open carrying their guns to school. You know, my neighbor's parents live in Florida. And he tells me it's Saturday night. His parents who are in their 60s. They go to the range. You know, let's go get some pizza and wings. We go to the range and shoot. It's not like if you say that here, that's it. You know, it's just because we're in a different part of the states. It's different. You know, but really, I think the challenge as a teacher, how to be in the middle, and then the challenge as an administrator, how do I make sure my teachers are staying as dispassionate as they can, you know? Go ahead.
A quick question about the administration part and the school board's role in the whole case that we were looking at. It was just really interesting for me to see there was a secretary type person. He was sitting like on the side, and the parents asked, did you receive our email and did you pass it on? he came across as really, really arrogant. And I just wanted to get you guys' opinion, because obviously you work in this. I haven't even started yet. But just as a lay person looking at it, I just think that the school district, by not, it also that the parents felt that they weren't being heard. And I think this issue seemed to me to escalate to a completely different level. And I think the school board could have avoided it earlier by maybe engaging in more direct communication. The fact that, oh, I didn't feel it important to pass on your email. I mean, it was clearly very important to these parents, and then they ended up going, taking it to the media, which made everything obviously a much bigger issue. I'm not saying that they shouldn't have, but what is your impression? Because I just felt like the school board maybe could have been a little bit more responsive, but maybe I'm completely out. But that was just what I observed.
I think just to kind of hear what you're saying, I mean, these districts have, like my district has 1,000 students in one high school, so we have over 2,000 students. Things happen every minute, every day, and superintendents, the principals, like the board, they can't know everything and can't check their email, minute by minute. So I would wonder, you would hope that probably they didn't get to it because something else was more important. And it might have been a HIB or something, or student safety would trump, a Islam, subject. So I would hope that it was something to that effect, and that would be the reason I would think that, they just couldn't get to it. I hope that they weren't just passing the buck just to say, all right, let's make them come in, let's make them speak, and then let's hear them out.
Okay.
To add to what Maria was saying, I think that the parents should have been told the reason why they were being taught that religion and why they went in depth to the details of the 5 pillars, I think it was, because it was teaching more about the culture, what type of people they are, believing that religion. And I think that's the understanding that the parents lacked. And the fact that the one parent experienced an issue of her own religion prior to that issue that she brought up to the super and everyone who was at that hearing, I think that's literally what triggered her to want to make this into a bigger issue, because her child was shunned down when he brought up his religion for something as simple as a coat and glove drive. And when another religion was brought to his attention, she was more like, why was it an issue a few years back, and now all of a sudden it's not an issue because you're teaching it in the classroom? I think she was blinded by that. And everyone at that hearing, or somebody at that hearing, should have brought that to her attention, that it wasn't more to convince him to be a part of a religion, but more to learn about other religions if he was already so knowledgeable in one. Because learning about another religion it's not trying to become someone in that religion. It's more just learning about the culture, where it originated, how long has it been there, what type of people are there, where is it practiced. Just there's a lot more than just the 5 pilgrims or pillars that they learned from that video. And the writing assignment was a little skeptical, but when I got to hear the students and what they experienced, and even that 8th grader that was like, she lied. Last year we learned about such and such religion. It's just this year we learned about that one. I was more like, did she pay attention to her child's curriculum last year? Like, did she actually know that last year he was taught Christianity and Hinduism and Buddhism, and this year it was just Islam? It almost made me doubt her a little bit, like in that sense. I don't know if anybody else agrees, but
yeah, and I think her point too, the mom's point, was what I found really interesting, and I absolutely agree with you. Just the one point that I found interesting was that the mom said that the teacher told the rest of the class it wasn't because there was a religious message in his presentation, there was a technical malfunction. And that why would the teacher lie about that? Why wouldn't the teacher just say, we don't accept these kind of messages in your drive, if that is the school policy? That was the one part that I didn't understand. Why would a teacher lie to the rest of the class about that? I didn't understand that.
Anybody? Anybody want to tackle that one?
I just getting back to the person who spoke 2 people ago. I agree with the who may have been a little bit of a personal thing from when her son was in 4th grade. It seemed like she kind of carried that when they wouldn't allow him to express what he said about his own religion, Christianity. That it felt like the mom was almost carrying that 3 years later, and that seemed to spark like what was driving her at that point when he was in 7th grade. So it to me, it seemed like it definitely had some kind of personal root in it.
I can see why the teacher might have lied and said there was technical difficulties and that's why he couldn't show the presentation, in a sense where probably the student would get offended if she would say, you know, you can't show this because you have a Bible quote in here. But even after, if she would have said that just to everyone in the classroom, I would have probably pulled them aside and said, you know, the reality is that, you know, you put such and such in your presentation and we just can't show that type of quote to the entire class because not everyone believes your same beliefs. I think that would have clarified a lot more, and you know, and having the student go back to the mom and explain the situation, I think that the mom would have understood as well. I think it was just a little carried away by the mom, honestly.
Jumping in as probably the only Muslim in this class, the whole idea behind the line itself is, even in Arabic, the idea behind it is to have the niyyah. So even if you say the word niyyah means like the intention to want to convert or to believe within that statement itself. So me saying that there is no God but God and Muhammad is his last messenger doesn't necessarily mean I'm indoctrinating students into, you know, becoming Muslim. So, I mean, growing up, I went to an all-Catholic school as well back in South America. I was born in South America. And it didn't really affect me as much. I mean, I picked up as much as I could. There were certain prayers that I couldn't, you know, be involved in because as a Muslim, I wasn't able to say them. But, you know, I respected the religion. And in the matter of how it was presented to me, I never really went back and said, oh, why don't you guys, you know, teach Islam? Because as a kid, you don't really understand the premises of what a school teaches. But had the teacher fully explained that, you know, this is what Muslims say and this is what Muslims believe, I feel like they would have taken it a different way. But seeing as the parents do have a more conservative ideal in regards to their own religion and their own biases, you know, they look at it as, especially with Islam being so prevalent in the news and all these things, and they see it as a way to kind of attack what's being taught, to kind of just shut it down and not really bring it up as much as it should have been brought up and not fully explained as it should, you know? And Ashley, I completely agree with you, but at the same time, I just feel like reading into the religion itself, there's other ways to go about it. And had the teacher just fully explained what the meaning was, because in all honesty, it doesn't really count unless you say it in Arabic. That's the first thing. And you have to be completely like, yeah. So, I mean, I could be saying there's no Jesus but Jesus. Does it mean I'm saying anything other than what I'm saying? Is there really a meaning behind it? I mean,
agreed.
It's weird.
I mean,
really...
no, but I think you're on point in a lot of it because, yeah, first of all, this is something that's, you know, in the mainstream, you know, and it's something that's been in the mainstream whether
for a while,
since September 11th. That's really what brought it to the forefront. You know, was it something before that? Sure, but September 11th brought it to the forefront. And it's just that for. I think as a parent of 3 kids, I think my children are much more tolerant, if you will, because they're exposed to so many different people. When I grew up, I wasn't exposed for the most part to anybody who didn't kind of look like me. My kids have been exposed. They tell me, and it's not just they'll know, oh, I've got, you know, there's a kid who's Jewish in my school, who's Islam or a Muslim, who's a Protestant, who's, you know, from this country, from that country. They do this holiday, this. And I think that's great because when they get older, this is not going to be, oh, I'm a anything phobe or a phobia of anything because they've already been exposed to this at such a young age. You know, and I think that's really, we're missing kind of like, well, what's the benefit of all this? You know, you see parents fighting over, well, my kid learned this I mean, first of all, I don't think any kid stood up and said, by the way, this was really bad that I learned this. But look at how exposed they are to all these different religions, schools of thought, and all that. And then they have the ability to think for themselves, but also to I just don't see any type of, not that there isn't any, but like, I don't see the prejudice of, hey, my kids are telling me, hey, this one, hey, this one dresses differently than me. But I know why. The fourth grader tells me, "Oh yeah, this is because today is this holy day or whatever," and I'm like, "That's impressive."
And what's
and that
funny is that younger students don't really have that bias in their head. So when they're learning something, they're like, "Oh, this is pretty cool." I didn't know about that.
Exactly.
So when growing up learning about the 10 Commandments, I was like, Mom, 10 Commandments, do we have that in Islam? And she's like, yeah, but they're kind of a different ideal. They're called pillars. That's literally what it is. It's just named completely different.
Exactly. And that's and part of that exposure, I think, is really important. And it seems appropriate at that middle school level where you start to, who am I, why am I here, and all that stuff. And you're trying to understand that there is a world outside of your own world, where people believe different things and wear different things and eat different things and look differently, but that's okay. And I think I'm all for that. And my kids we're a Catholic family. They're being raised Catholic. That doesn't mean that, and I tell them, it doesn't mean that makes you any better than anybody else. But, I want you to understand too, that there are other people that don't believe the same thing. And this is what they believe. And this is why they believe it, and all that together. Because I think we're not going to see the benefit of this until our kids, get older into adulthood and they're making decisions, and all of a sudden it's, this isn't, maybe we'll have a more tolerant world, and well, maybe that does kind of sound rosy, but that's my hope, is that the more we're exposed, like, I get that, this is what I might look at, and say, well, that's, I don't get that, that's kind of scary. My kids are, no, Daddy, this is, this is, did you know? And they love coming home and telling me, this is what I learned today. And I think I'm all for it. Personally, I'm all for it, because the more we expose our kids, the more we expose our students to all different things, I think the more any type of bigoted idea
they are.
Yeah, it's like all of a sudden it's like, yeah, it's like, wow, they're like, oh, this is what are you talking, this is, I already know what this is. I get this. And I just, I don't know. I'm hoping that's as a teacher, that's what I try. And the more the more you're empowered, and the more things make sense to you. Like I don't, I'm not going to tell you. I tell my seniors when they graduate, I'm not going to tell you, okay, you're not, don't go to college and drink, because most of you've done it already. And second of all, it's up to you to make your own decisions. But if you decide to do X, these are all the things that could happen as a result of that. But I want you to make your own decision. But the more information you have, as a teacher, the more information I give you, the better informed decision you can make. And I think this is the same thing. My son will be in June. God, in 2 years he'll be going into 7th grade, and he'll be exposed to that same curriculum. I'm all for it. I think it's something that everybody should learn. But
I don't know if anybody heard the comment video afterwards. I listened to it in the background, and a principal from Jersey City started speaking about how she had the Heritage Day in her school, and where I think it was like they dressed up. I forgot what the outfit was called, but they were Muslim, and the kids changed right before 3 o'clock, and one of the students didn't change, and the other students came up to him and were like, I don't want to walk home with you because you look like a terrorist, just because he was dressed in his culture. And the principal, she looked like she was about to break in tears, and she was just like so sad to hear that, even though he was proud of his heritage and his religion, these kids knew that they couldn't go outside looking like they were representing their culture and their religion, because other people don't accept them. And it's very sad to see and hear someone firsthand experience that, and see their students feel that way, feel like when they're out of school, they don't feel protected anymore, and that there are people who are judging so much that they're actually afraid of being themselves.
Tie all that back now where it's to start in the classroom, and how you're presenting that curriculum, and thinking about one of the things that I know I hit in the 502 course, we spend time talking about diversity. And, as a teacher, trying to understand where all your kids are coming from, what what they bring to the table. And I think it's, how many of, you have to understand, the different, I want to say not stereotypes, but the different, beliefs and what is appropriate. There are Asian culture believes that the teacher's always right, and there are kids that will not argue with me. I'm like, even though I tell you it's okay to tell me I'm wrong, I know I can't do that. My parents would be so disappointed in me if I told you you're wrong. And then and part of me is thinking like, yeah, I'm telling you that's okay, but I have to think, where are you coming from with this? Because in the Far Eastern world, teacher's always right. Even when teacher's wrong, teacher's right. So how do so I think part of it's incumbent on us too as teachers. If I'm going to present the curriculum, I have to make sure that I'm thinking about everybody that I have in my who's in front of me, because I want to make sure that I do that in a manner that is not either raising someone up on a pedestal or dropping someone down.
Would you differentiate the curriculum then? So you have to. So in the Swedish culture, everything is non-hierarchical, right? So everything is flat. Everybody is equal. And then what you were just mentioning, it's a very different setup. So would I, as a Swedish student, be required to argue with you and say you're wrong? And then would you have a different assignment for the Asian student because they're called? Like, how would you do with that?
I'll ask the class first. How would you do with that?
I don't know. I think I would make a question opinionated, like a personal opinion, and then I would ask them what they think it should be.
Okay.
And literally start it off there. I mean, I believe that there would probably be some students that would want equality, and they would want to believe that they can speak up, not speak up in the sense of disrespect, but speak up to the teacher and say, I disagree because, and kind of have their own voice. So I would kind of give them a choice, like not a choice, but an opportunity to speak on both, like what and what you would want it to be, if that makes any sense.
Okay. Agreed. I'm not so much that I differentiate what I assign, but I think I have to understand the culture of the kids, that are in front of me, and to understand, and part of that's culture, but really understand and just in general what I have in front of me, what their beliefs are, what I know is important, what I know I can talk about, what I can't talk about, and what potentially is going to might pinch the wrong nerve. There are times where you might say something, even if it's incidentally, and you get a strong reaction from a student. Okay, now you got to think, well, where is this coming from? Why am I, did I say something that was insensitive? Did I, it's so important as a teacher to understand who your kids are, in your classrooms, and also as a curriculum writer, what's the audience? So who's that intended target for that curriculum? Because we don't want to present curriculum in a way that is biased towards a group of people, or doesn't take into account a broader global audience. And I know there's parts of the country where that is not the case. But I just call it idealistic, but I just think that's really important. We could go on all night. I'm going to ask for anybody else with some last thoughts, because I see it's 10 after 5. And I do see that I'm pretty sure Colleen's sitting in the car. I don't know if Colleen's driving,
yes,
but I know you are driving. Okay, please don't get a ticket.
Driving.
Okay, you're not.
I
but
have Wi-Fi.
Okay, I just I've had students in the past who've actually been driving, so I was looking at that going, I know she's in the car. I'm not going to admit it, say anything right now, but I'm like, I really hope she's not driving. But hey, this is, we couldn't do this if we're all sitting in the classroom. So I'll take for last thoughts. Anybody on anything we've talked about? I think you're all, really, I think we could do this. We could go to the wee hours in the morning. I'm not sure my children would be happy if I was stuck in the basement till 2:00 in the morning. But I think you've got it. If I was giving a grade, it's like A, because I think you're grasping what the ideas behind hidden curriculum, and the stuff I asked you to look at. So any last thoughts from anybody?
I actually kind of have more of a question for everybody here. So, basically, going back to the standard for this, that would you to generate the activity that was questionable over here, was the standard actually met? If we're looking at the standard, it's compare and contrast world religions developed in a certain time period, their patterns of expression, and their responses to current challenges.
Is the question is the standard, is the standard being met? I mean, I think it is, because, and you look at that, how is that standard, part of that's where's the sequences that, over the 1 or the 2 year period. But yeah, I think, you have to look at anything that you assign, any work that you do, how is that related? How does what standard does that fit? Because as a teacher, if I want to do something that I think is so important, I need to make sure that it's somehow curriculum related. When I first taught, I first hired at Bergen Catholic, I taught religion for 2 years. And the first year I was there, this was when the Pope died. And I'm looking at this in January going, the Pope ain't going to last long. Let's do papal succession now. Let's talk about what happens when the Pope dies. So when the Pope died, like 6 weeks later, all my kids were like, they knew exactly what was going to happen, where everybody else had to stop and talk about papal succession. Mine are like, oh yeah, the white smoke and the black smoke and blah blah blah. They had it all perfect because I gambled going, he's not going to last that much longer. But there was a tie to the curriculum. I could tie back to, I was going, okay, well, we talk about New Testament and the history of the church and blah blah blah. I had a defense ready because I knew it was important, but I wasn't going to talk about something that I knew didn't have a connection back to my curriculum. And that's the key as a teacher. Where's the standard being met? And if you can't say, yes, here's the standard, here's the assignment or the learning activities or the assessments I plan to do to meet the standard, then you're playing with fire, because then I'm not sure if you're questioned on it, you can defend it. And that's where the trouble lies. I think the standard was met. It could be as simple as we're going to do a graphic organizer, and we're going to list all the religions and similarities and differences and go across the board. I still personally, I don't see anything wrong with the assignment. I don't think there was an indoctrination. I don't think there was, some type of ulterior motive by the school district of the Chathams to inflict Islam and discount any other religion. I just don't see it, and forget about the fact that all these people got up in front of the board and said, this is, no, there's, we want our kids to learn about this, and the parents talking about that too. But that's the big question that's Rob asking is does the assignment meet the standards? And that's a question as a supervisor you're gonna have to ask too, and answer is, what my teachers are writing and the curriculum stuff they want to teach, the lesson plans, does that meet, state curriculum, district curriculum, and so forth? So I agree.
I also learned that through this case is how important it is to know all the policies of your school. So I think a lot of it was conflicting with the policies of the, as far as the controversial issues, and then also the curriculum of the class, the 7th grade class, where they were, more, you look at that she was with the critical thinking skills and exploratory, but then the policies were more talking about how you have to talk about all the different sides. So I think it's important also as teachers to look at the policies of your school district.
Agreed. Yeah. I mean, I work in a Catholic school. I can't, there's rules I have to follow in addition to like my standards. Like I can't, I can't discount anything that's, that's accepted in the Catholic faith. I that's a big no-no. And forget about the non-curricular stuff. Like I can't say if I believe anything that is in contradiction to what the church says, I can't publicly say that. That's no good. So I have to think about, when kids inevitably ask me about, when we talk about, let's say we're talking about it's Good Friday, talking about Jesus's crucifixion, and they ask me about capital punishment. My answer is supposed to be, I don't believe in capital punishment because I'm Catholic, and I work in a Catholic school. If I have any other feeling like that, I'm not supposed to even say that. Then I see as a teacher, well, then how can I get students to think about both sides of the issue where I can't even talk about the other side of the issue? So it's a challenge for everybody. And it's not just, I don't want to say this is just a public school thing, because I wrestle with that too. Like I want kids to think about, thinking about, on your own, what do you believe? But, I'm not going to do that in a way where, it's an easy way to just, fire me because I say something that's in contradiction to the Catholic Church. And I pretty much promise, especially when I talk religion, it's like, I promise that I'm going to do, what the book tells me to, and that's it. So, you have to think about that. And you also think about, culturally or not culturally, geographically where you are, what's accepted, what are accepted standards. I think we in this area of the country, I think we promote an idea of diversity and, learning about all different kinds of things, cultures, ideas, but there are some places where that's not the case, and that's a challenge for a teacher and administrator. How do you make that curriculum available to everybody, and how do you keep your bias out? There's a lot of challenges, and I think I'm hoping that at least I got your mind turning about, well, when I see this in the classroom, whether it's going to be, because some of you could be in a month and a half when you start in September, when you're asked that interview question on August 30th for the September 1st job, how do I deal with this as an administrator? How am I going to deal with if I have issues? That's a great question. If you're looking for a supervisor's job, how do you deal with a teacher that's, which I've used the term gone rogue? Be prepared to answer that question, because as an administrator, this is not something that you're going to, that was unique to the Chatham School District. It could be anywhere that you're going to deal with something like this. So, all hopefully good food for thought. Any last thoughts? Because I'm just cognizant of the time. It's a great conversation. Trust me. I'm thrilled that that we sometimes it goes, and it's by 9:13. I'm looking at the clock hearing crickets. So it was a great conversation. I think whether you said something or you didn't say something, I think that just in there it was a good thing. So any last thoughts?
This is going forward, correct? The judge, did we talk about that before? This is going
forward.
The
last article I saw,
was it last week?
Oh, maybe there was one. Hold on. Let me.
Yeah.
Hold on. There was one. This was from January. Hold on. April 2018, June. Oh, yes. Lawsuit over Islam and Chatham curriculum headed to court. Now, this is from patch.com, which, is like a local. Yeah, which is almost more on top of it than like the Bergen Record or the Star Ledger or anything. A lawsuit accusing the school district of the Chathams of violating First Amendment rights by including Islam in school curriculum will be allowed to proceed. So this is a federal court, and this was June 21st. Libby Hilsenrath, the mother of a Chatham middle school student, sued the school district in January over the inclusion of Islam in the curriculum of the 7th grade World Geography and Cultures class, alleging that the unit focused on the Middle East and North Africa violates the First Amendment by promoting Islam while ignoring Christianity and Judaism. And I think she's going after the superintendent, principal, anybody else she can get her hands on. But yeah, it's going to court, which is interesting. I mean, I'm not sure that means that it's, they're guilty or not guilty. There's enough here that we need to let, the legal system potentially figure it out. Was this, it could have, you know, is there enough evidence? I don't know. But that's what we have a legal system for. So if we got it this far, then it's got to play out, you know, and it'll be interesting. Be interesting to see how this one, because this is one of those that I know a lot of other places are going to watch. Okay, well, hey, guess what? If New Jersey said you can't do it, then how does that change how I administer curriculum, how I write curriculum, how I, you know, how I teach? Because this is different stuff. So
at that point, they might as well just completely exclude all religion from any type of curriculum.
Might have to be, first of all, keep your eyes on the road. Second of all,
I'm paying attention. I'm paying attention.
I know. It's all or nothing. You know, it's because then how do I say, well, what if I, you know, if we came up with a list of, you know, accepted religions, you know, how do I make sure that I'm including them all? You know, and that's where you might run the risk of, you know, someone getting offended. I think this is going to be closely watched. This is one of those things that could find its way working through this courts. Like this could be like a Supreme Court kind of thing. You know, that starts off with what people think might be silly, but you know, someone's going to have to define why is my wife calling me from upstairs?
Hold on a minute. Yeah, I have my team calling me too. I gotta go.
I'm sorry. Okay. Like we don't know what I'm doing down here. Okay. So yeah, wait a minute. There we go. There we go. So yes, I agree that, you know, is this an all or nothing? Is this a you know, how do we define what we can talk about, what we can't talk about? But yeah, this will have, I think, bigger implications than the Chathams in New Jersey. So anybody else?
I definitely don't think they should exclude religion from the curriculum, because I just feel like it teaches so much about the people that are following the religion that I feel like the kids would be missing out on a lot. I mean, the origin and their traditions, like there's so much that's wrapped around religion. Like, I don't know. I don't think that it should definitely be something that shouldn't be removed.
Yeah, you know, I've taught junior high CCT now for 5 years, and every summer I realize this is why I do high school when I do the junior high. But I do, you know, a week of hardcore, you know, it's like boot camp, you know. But what we do is, you know, I try to present them with, this is what, you know, everything about Catholicism entails, so it makes you a better practicing member of that religion. But also, when we do comparative stuff, you can say, hey, guess what? We're not that much different. You know, the first thing I always tell them, like, if it wasn't for Jesus, we'd all be Jewish, which scares them. Like, what do you mean? You know, like, and then once they stop and think about that, you know, they're like, oh yeah, you know. So it's like, I want you to understand how all these other different religions work, so that, you know, it's you once you have an understanding, it's not like, you know, this really isn't what I thought it was. This isn't what the media portrays it to be. This is, you know, I know for myself, you know, and I think that's what I know a lot of you are hitting on too, that, yeah, it's I want to give them as much information as possible so they can, you know, figure out things for themselves, make their own decisions. I agree, Ashley, 100%.
A little sidebar. Muslims believe that Islam doesn't exist without Judaism or Christianity, because it bases, as a Muslim, one of the pillars is you're supposed to actually believe in the Torah and the Bible, not necessarily the same way, you know, Jews and Christians believe in their own text, but as a way to, you know, you're acknowledging that there are other people of faith in this world. And, you know, we also tie in all Abraham, Noah, you know, they're all considered prophets. Even Jesus is considered a prophet in Islam. So it's really just a way of, you can't just exclude one thing about the religion and only teach a couple of things. You really have to go into detail for students to understand. And if they're going to bring it back home, you know, parents are going to be biased regardless. I mean, whether they're Christian or Jewish or Muslim or Buddhist or any religion of any sort, it's really just putting aside your own bias and actually considering every little fact and knowledge. And, you know, even in high school, we had a little activity called Ask a Muslim Day. and I was the head of the Muslim club, I was the president. And a lot of students would ask me, do I have to be Muslim to join the Muslim club? And I would say, absolutely not. You could be whatever faith you want to be and join. And, you could learn about the religion. And we ended up overtaking the entire auditorium, had the whole stage on, and people were really interested because their understanding of the religion was what they saw on TV or their watered down information that came from their parents or their cousins or, every other external factor out there. And it was a success, and the principal loved it. So he allowed it for it to go on the following year. And after I graduated, I don't know if it still goes on, but it was a success. And honestly, I feel like schools should really partake in certain activities to open the knowledge to kids. And whether it has to be, let's ask a Christian day or just put a panel of a Jew, a Christian, and a Muslim on stage and really incorporate everything together.
We didn't even touch on co-curricular, stuff. And that we might have to do this, we might do this again. We haven't hit on the co-curricular stuff. There was, I agree, and so let's think about this. Let's think about, okay, what's the takeaway from the last almost hour and a half? We're and I have to say, how many crazy people would be 10 after 10 on a Thursday, 20 after 10 on a Thursday night, and we're having an in-depth conversation, about curriculum. So kudos. But the takeaway is okay. Like if you're going into teaching, how do I make sure that my curriculum is inclusive? How do I make sure what's in my hidden curriculum? And that's, I think, a big question because we all have it. What am I really teaching? Am I teaching anything that shouldn't be there? Am I teaching anything that, do I have a bias even though I don't think I do? Like it might, am I coming across with stuff that's biased? This is not just for social studies or religion or anything. This could be any subject area. And as an administrator, how do I make sure my teachers are teaching what they should be teaching? And how do I address it when they don't? Because I deal with that when I've got teachers that are, I might, here's the basic outline for, computer applications too. And you're doing something, you're not even close. Like what are we doing? Oh, I thought this would be fun to do. Okay, but that's not what we have in the curriculum. And then how do you deal with that as an administrator? Who just I'm sure somebody else want to say something. So yeah, I mean that's what I think where we go from here. It's not something that I think it's important enough that it's something we have to discuss, and it's not exactly when I first floated the idea, I forget who I was talking to as I said, oh, I'm going to do this in my curriculum class. And they're like, even just it was like this is like a hotbed. I'm like, oh, it's not a hotbed. This is just the primer for the discussion, and I'm glad that, part of, if we're going to become better teachers, me included, we kind of have to look at the practice of what we do, our craft. And I think this is an important part of it. So I'm going to go again for last minute or last thoughts or comments. And I'm by no means still rushing because I'm now wide awake. It's like going to bed now is not going to happen anytime soon. So, anybody with thoughts or anything they want to say. I will also say too, like, I'll be the last one to leave the hangout. So if you have any questions, of course, related, I'll be more than happy to answer them. But anybody else with any last minute or any, final thoughts or, comments or anything like that? Okay. Well,
I've been thinking about this topic since 6 o'clock with my boyfriend. I'm like, okay. You believe it?
Good. I mean, that's. I said, if you're going into teaching, you can't just be a stagnant. This is my own little cocoon. You have to you always have to think about your craft, how you do it, and how you make it better. I reflect on that primary reflection of, how I reflect as I'm going and what I'm changing. And then when I leave school, as I think about, well, what did I do? What can I do differently tomorrow? And what went good, what didn't go. And as teachers, we do it all the time. We don't even realize we're doing it, but we're always critiquing. I want to do this differently tomorrow or next month or next year, whatever the case is. I think that's an important part of what we do is the constant, did I do this right? Did I, how can I do it better? Is there a better way I can explain this? There are times like I'm excited about something that I might be doing in March of next year because I figured out last March, wow, I did this wrong. So it's an important thing to do as teachers, is to constantly reflect on what it is that we do and how do we make it better. Anybody else? Thank you, all of you, for a good, lively discussion. I'll have the entire video on Blackboard once YouTube processes it, and I'll put the link up there. Again, like I said, I'm going to stop the Hangout now, but I will be the last person to leave. If you have any questions or anything you need to ask me, course-wise or whatever, I'll stick around because, like I said, sleep ain't coming right away, so I got to do some more laundry anyway. So